Welcome back to the Chasing Happiness podcast, an honest podcast about finding happiness, what it really means, and the process of getting there. My name is Crystal, and today I have a special guest with me. Today I'm joined by Erin Hodgson, and I have so many questions for Erin, but the first one that I'm going to ask you is, out of all of the things in the world that you could have chosen to do, you have chosen to work in a field that's based around spirituality. You are an ancestral guide, a spiritual mentor. So for people who don't know you, do you want to give a brief introduction to who you are and then sort of explain what this means?
Sure. So yeah, you're right. I am a spiritual mentor. I'm an intuitive healer. I work with ancestors. I'm a psychic medium. So I use a lot of, connection with ancestors in my work. And what's really interesting for me is that you were like, oh, you chose to, and I'm like, I didn't choose any of it. I didn't choose any of it. It chose me, I think. And so I work in collaboration with my very dear friend, Ali. We have a business together called Awakening the Wise Woman. And we work together with women to, I guess, bring humanness and spirituality together in a way that feels balanced and harmonious for the women we work with. So Ellie is an empowerment coach, and obviously I'm the spiritual side of things. And I didn't used to do this work. I probably spent the first 38 years of my life being completely unaware of this work and this life and what I do now. And then a little under 2 years ago, I was told by a psychic medium that I know that I had all the same gifts as she did. And I thought she was just being silly. I may have used a couple of choice words and told her to get lost. And she was like, no, genuinely, you've got all of the same gifts. And as soon as she told me that, something clicked. And I immediately started to connect with spirit and, be able to communicate with loved ones on the other side. And it just flooded in, really, this awareness that actually, being human is only a very small part of who we are and what we're here for. And and so I guess in a nutshell, that's what I do is explore the other part of who we are and what we do.
I love that. Yeah. And I think it's beautiful that it sort of chose you, because one of the things that I talk about here on the podcast is sort of how it can be a struggle in our lives to find that thing that we're meant to be doing, whatever you want to call that, whether it's purpose or drive or whatever. And sometimes you don't find it until you're later in life. Sometimes you know it, 19, what it is. So when you sat down and you sort of had that realization and your life started to change, did you struggle with what that was going to look like? How did that sort of unfold for you?
Yeah, it did. And it's interesting that you bring up purpose, because that's something that I navigate a little bit differently to others, I think. So, a lot of people are like, oh, I just need to find my purpose, or I'm living my purpose, or whatever. And I kind of look at it like, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, right? So I don't think we have a specific purpose within that. I think we should live purposefully. We should be, everything that we do should be purposeful. But I don't think that we have one set purpose. And so for me, the fact that, I'm doing this work and I'm engaging with that other side of myself that I was unaware of, it's less of a purpose and more about being purposeful and getting away from that doing and being in that being state. And that's kind of what my truth is. And that's what I share with people as my truth, and invite people to explore what theirs looks like alongside that. And, for some people it makes sense and others it doesn't. And both are totally fine with me. I don't think we're here to tell people how to live. I think we're here to live the way that we feel is true for us, and invite others to explore that for themselves and see what happens,
There is such magic in that, because I think, especially here in North America, so I'm in Canada, you're in New Zealand, which, as we spoke before we started recording, I said, I think a lot of people have this magical view of what it's like to live there. But we live in very different countries on very different parts of the world. But in a lot of ways, I think the world is similar in the essence that everybody is constantly comparing their neighbor to themselves, the life that their neighbor is living, how they're coping with COVID or just general work life or motherhood or whatever it happens to be. And everybody's experience is actually so vastly different based on what we're going through, what our parents have been through, what our grandparents have been through. And so the fact that you do this work, I think is fantastic and magical, because so many of us don't realize we're actually carrying things that aren't necessarily ours. They belong to our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents. So when you decided to start working in ancestral trauma, what did that sort of like, how did that come to be? Because most people don't have that awareness that that's what's happening, let alone decide this is what I'm going to work on.
Yeah. So I've always been connected to ancestors, I think. From a really young age, I spent a lot of time with my grandmothers. And then as they have passed over time, I have been more interested in my lineage and where I come from and who I come from. I think it's really important that we engage with who we come from more than where we come from. And I've always kind of had that belief system, but then to engage with ancestors on a much deeper spiritual level, it became really clear to me really quickly that a lot of who we are now is inherited. A lot of it is like our belief systems, our value systems, the way that we engage with the world, what we believe is possible for us. And it's interesting that you think that being in Canada and being in New Zealand is so different, because when you look at how both places have come to be and how we've come to be in them, actually they're very similar, like they're colonial states. They they were colonized, and Indigenous people were previously there, and the Indigenous or First Nation people and Māori people, they were very much, societies that were very different in the way that they engaged with each other and the world, to the settlers that came from, the United Kingdom, England, that colonial sort of vibe that they have, that took over the world and were like, well, we're just going to do it our way. Right. And which, is very patriarchal. It's very entrenched in that organized religion and all of that sort of thing. And so it's really interesting, because ultimately we probably have very similar value systems and very similar belief systems around how we engage with the world and what is possible for us as essentially white women in a multicultural society. And so that has always interested me anyway. Then to have the door open and to see that actually the ancestral trauma is a lot of what we carry now, and how we can, if we do the work around our own stuff and around the ancestral stuff, it heals the lineage. It's not just about us. I have children, so obviously I'm interested in what work I can do that supports them. They're not biologically my children. So in terms of like trying to work out lineage and how to deal with that ancestral trauma, it looks a little bit different for me than it does for others. Sure. But I think either way, acknowledging that who we come from as a collective holds so much trauma and so much oppression, particularly for women, that idea that we are less than, or that we should be held small, or that we should be told what to do. Those kind of ideals that we now, our generation, are starting to rebel against and say, actually, that's not who I want to be and how I want to be in the world. It's such important work, because when we acknowledge, a lot of the stuff that comes up for us also came up for our mothers and our grandmothers and their mothers, and it was pushed back down. Like it wasn't the time to deal with it, but now is the time to deal with it. And so the invitation for us is to step up and say, actually, I'm going to deal with that. And in doing so, I'm going to heal it for everybody that's been before me, who has had that same level of trauma and oppression come forward in their lives that they've had to push back down.
That's such a big thing, because I think, especially for a lot of the people who listen to this podcast, there is a realization at some point that you are carrying things that are not necessarily yours, but they have affected your life, whether that be as you were speaking a minute ago, about just sort of how we learn to be in the world, or whether that be, you know, a physical trauma, an emotional trauma, whatever it happens to be. So for people who maybe are listening to this, but have never really explored what that is or how they can start to work on it, what suggestions would you have for them?
I think the first part is just knowing who they are, knowing who you come from and their stories, and exploring that. I look at my grandmothers, for example, and actually today is the 26th anniversary of my grandmother passing.
Oh.
And I look at her life, and there was so much trauma that she went through in her life that I think we have inherited, that perhaps when we didn't look at her as a person, when we looked at her as the matriarch and the, you know, the head of the family type thing, you see her in a different way when you actually engage with her as a woman, and when you engage with her as someone who loved and lost and had, you know, all kinds of trauma. She was widowed with 6 children when my dad was 15. She grew up not knowing that her parents had a son before they got married, and that adopted him out, and he died in World War I. You know, like, there's lots of different things that come into who she was as a woman and how she was in the world. And we experience these people, I call them the known ancestors, the ones that we can call by name and that we can, we can recall memories of. Those known ancestors, we need to first bear witness to them as genuine people who lived a full and traumatic life. I mean, if we're talking about our grandparents and great-grandparents, they've lived through world wars, they've lived through pandemics, they've lived through massive migrations, some of them.
Sure.
Like some of our great-grandparents, for example, probably got on a ship and never saw their families again.
Right.
And went to an entirely different world where everything was different. And we're just basically made to make it work. I've got a great grandmother who ended up in a mental institution, and her children never saw her again. She was there for 15 years. Those sorts of traumas don't just go away when someone leaves. Like, the energy of that is held in our souls. And so we have to do the work to unravel some of that stuff and witness that and say, actually, what happened was really wrong. And, we can forgive it, and we can do the work to shift that energy and just replace it with love. And when we do that, then we create space for us to be better and to leave better for our children and our grandchildren. And that's ultimately the drive, I think, is that concept of legacy and wanting to leave a better world than the world we have inherited.
Right. And I think that's ultimately, I think for most of the people I speak with, that really is the goal, to be better themselves, to create better for the kids, so that the generations that come after us maybe don't have the same struggles. We know they're going to have some struggles because that's just part of the human experience, but maybe they don't repeat the same struggles over and over and over again. So I love that this is the work that you do. I think especially for us as women, we very often find it hard to put ourselves first. We find it hard to focus on the things that we need spiritually, emotionally, physically, because we are so consumed by what everyone around us needs. So the fact that you're doing this with women, you're focusing on working with women, I think is magical, because we are starting to finally get to a place, I think, in the world where we are supporting other women in a way that it's not a competition about who has how much of the pie. It's literally about creating more pies so that more and more people can have it.
Exactly.
So how did you guys decide to sort of start this business?
Oh, before Ellie and I met, we met in February. And before Ellie and I met, she was a coach for women, a life coach. And I was working as many things, copywriter predominantly, but also a psychic medium, sort of ancestral guide on the side. And so when we met, we instantly had this remembering that we had been together before. Like it was this just real soul deep, like, I know you and I love you and I am supposed to be here with you. And so we started talking, and genuinely by May, we were like, okay, we're spending way too much time talking to not make money out of this. Like, we have to create a business from this, or we have to stop it because it's actually killing our own businesses. And so we talked about, like, we both just had the same value. Like, women have lived in shadow for so long, right? We've been told that we can't engage with other women in a positive way. We've been told that, we have to behave ourselves, that we have to be the nice girl. It's we're supposed to strive for perfection, for, looking a particular way, or being a particular way, or doing particular things. And actually, like, we're just sort of asking each other, like, why is that the way, and why can't it be different? And then it changed into, well, what are we going to do about it to make it? And so that was the start of the business. It was built around the concept that, there is this wise woman archetype that is so revered, and yet we're told we can't have that until, we're postmenopausal and in that grandmother state almost. Right. And we were like, why? Like, I'm not yet 40. Ellie is just on the other side of 40. And we were both kind of like, well, why can't we have that now? Like, aren't we wise? Don't we have wisdom that we can share, that we can support other women with? And right. And so that was kind of the start of it, really, where we were like, well, actually, if we're feeling this way, there must be other women that feel this way. And part of our wisdom, I guess, is that we do really engage with that humanness and what happens in this human lifetime, and the spirituality and the awareness that actually this is just a human lifetime, but there is a much, much bigger spiritual or soul life happening alongside it in parallel, and that we need to bring both of those things together to be able to fully understand why we're here and what we need to do with it. Yeah, so that's basically how it came together. And we love it. We love what we do, and I love the fact that I get to do it with Ellie. I couldn't think of anyone better to work alongside. She's just so passionate about what we do, and she really buys into all of my message around that, working with the lineage and helping, deal with some of the things that we hold as women are things like, shame, guilt, blame. Those really, grief is a massive one. We hold those as women in our bodies and in our energies, and they're not often ours. They've been passed from generation to generation. And, Ellie really buys into that. She really believes that is necessary work. Likewise, I know that our society creates a lot of who we are as well, and our belief systems are very much defined by what we've been told in this lifetime we can have and we can be, and that's where Ellie works, and the beliefs and the value systems that we build for ourselves. And so it's a beautiful marriage, I think, of the way that we do things, and it's fun. I could talk about it all day, clearly.
I love that, though, especially because we do, in my personal experience, we do have a lot of unlearning to do based on what we've been taught in society, what we've been taught by, whether it be our ancestors, whether it be the world we grew up in, just economics, all of these things. So you get to a certain place in life and there is some unlearning that has to happen. There is some actual soul work that has to happen. And so I love that you guys are taking both sides of that coin and marrying them together to help women heal and become the best versions of themselves, whatever that means to them. So for everyone who is listening to the podcast, I will, of course, put in all the show notes everywhere that you can find them, the website, the links, everything that you need to know. But one of the things that I think people often ask me, so I'm going to assume there are people listening to this podcast who want to know as well, is if they have no idea where to start, if they don't even know what it means to start to look inward, how should they start that process?
Such a good question. I think the most important thing to know is that spirituality looks different for everybody. and spiritual practice is yours and yours alone. You know, I'm not, Ellie always talks about, like, she always thought that spirituality meant that she had to dress in hemp and eat chickpeas and do lots of, all day.
Sure.
And it's not that. I don't believe. I think spirituality for me is about connecting with that knowing inside you that there is more than who you are. And some people will meditate daily and they'll journal and they have like this really set practice. I'm not that person. I hate journaling. I'm really crap at it. I just can't do it. I meditate when I need to. I have learned to listen to when I need to dive into that a little bit deeper. I think when you're just starting out, the first thing you need to do is explore. Be open to it looking different to what you expect. And just learn to know what your yes and no feel like in your body. So there's a wee exercise you can do where you stand in front of a mirror and you look at yourself in the eye and you just go, yes, 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 and feel where that comes forward in your body, and where you can feel that. Do the same with no, like get really no, really aggressive about it. And they will feel different. And the thing is, though, that's like your North Star. That's the thing that it'll never change. Yes will always feel like yes, and no will always feel like no. And when you can engage with that and learn to trust that, then you can call upon that at any moment. You can say, is this the right thing for me to do? Yep, that feels like a yes. I'm going to go for it, right? And so you kind of, when you get to that like initial stage of really starting to trust yourself, then you can start to do some of the other stuff, some of the exploration, some of the digging and excavating and that kind of thing. But just know what truth feels like for you. Know what yes is, and allow that to guide you forward. And if it doesn't feel like a good yes, just sit back and don't leap in, just allow it to come forward and let you know, like, what is it? Ask yourself really good questions. What is it that is holding me back from that? What is it that doesn't feel right about that? And just allow the answers to come forward for you. It'll feel really weird initially because you're just like, well, that's just, but you'll get to learn as well what your inner mentor and your inner critic sound like. And knowing yourself on that level allows you to thrive so much more. Like it's stepping away from survival and it's stepping into that, like, I can really be what I want and I can co-create with the universe what I want to have. And so, yeah, start with the yes and no and just build up that level of trust in yourself, because the only person that has the answer is you. You can never get the answer from someone else. I mean, you can get validation, like I offer readings and things, and I'll often get someone go, oh, yeah, that's what I thought. I'm like, so why are we here? Like, you just wanted validation that you were right.
Right.
And, and that's normal. I think that's a human thing. But yeah, it's like just learning to go within is about learning to trust that you have the best answer for you. And as women especially, we're not raised to believe that, right? We're raised to look to other voices.
Right.
And you can see that in religion as an example, where they hold up a book, whether it's the Quran or the Bible or whatever, they hold up a book and they say, this is the truth. And at every single point, we should be questioning, is that my truth, right? And so as long as we can do that and walk forward in the world, asking at every step, what does my truth look like? Where is my path going? Then I think we will thrive in whatever way we're supposed to in this lifetime. And, that won't always look like lots of money or, a long, happy life or whatever. But maybe that's not what we're here for.
That's so awesome. And I love that your tip is just consistently be asking yourself, is this my truth? Because we live in this world where we are constantly told this is the truth, but so many people don't think to question it. So many people don't think to say, okay, well, if that's true for you, is it also for me? Here's why maybe part of it might not be, or maybe none of it is. And it's okay to ask those questions. So I love that you brought that up. And I love that you also mentioned everybody is a little bit different. Not everybody's going to want to journal or be able to journal. So find the practice that works for you, because I think spirituality really is this thing that is so uniquely individual to every person. And yet, most people, when you think spirituality, they have this idea in their head of it being the same everywhere. So I appreciate that you said that, because I think a lot of people, especially the people who listen to this podcast, because I do talk about things like journaling and meditation as ways to reduce stress, a lot of people think those are the only options. And so having people say, hey, there are other ways to do it. Maybe that's something that works for you once in a while, but maybe for you, it's a nature walk instead. Maybe it's standing out in the rain if that's who you are. All of these other things can be a part of your spirituality and your growth. It doesn't have to be this one thing that works for the person who lives down the road from you or whatever it happens to be. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think, like be open to it looking different to what everybody else tells you it looks like as well. I always talk about meditation, like, because I don't meditate, like I don't sit in silence and just meditate. And, I've had people say, oh, I can't do those guided ones. They don't, like, I just get distracted and all of that kind of thing. And I think the key for me around meditation is actually find what works for you. My best meditation is actually preparing dinner and cooking.
Oh, awesome.
Because I don't have to think about that, right? I can just get into I'm just going to chop the vegetables and I'm just going to still my mind and just focus on what I'm doing and allow everything else to fall away. And that's ultimately what meditation is about, right? It's about stilling the mind, being silent and still and allowing the things to come forward. And so if I've got something that I'm wanting to meditate on, I'll ask the question before I go and cook dinner. And then I'll start preparing dinner and I'll be like, okay, so how do I engage with that? Like, what do I need to know from that? And just allow it to come forward. And often I'll have to stop in the middle of cooking dinner to go and send a message to someone or write something down because I've allowed the answer to come forward.
Oh.
So, other people walk, some people swim. Swimming is great because it's all about water, and water is a great, it shifts energy in a big, big way. So swimming or having a shower or a bath is actually a really great meditation. But just allow yourself to really think about, when do I feel my most calm and my most still, even if my physical body isn't? And that's a great place to start with your meditation, because that's the space where your mind and your energy is at its calmest and its most still. And that's where you want to be when you're meditating.
I love that. I love that on so many different levels. One, because you brought up water, and I'm a huge water baby. I scuba dive, I swim, I love baths. I have moved to the ocean intentionally because I wanted to be by the ocean.
Beautiful.
And, I used to live by a lake. I love water, and there is just something for my soul that is soothing about the calm and the stillness of the water. And even when it's not calm and still, there's still something there for me. So I love that you brought that up. You are amazing. I could talk to you for hours, but I do want to be respectful of your time. So before I let you go, is there anything else you'd love to share with the Chasing Happiness community, whether it be in regards to the work you do specifically or just life in general?
I think my biggest thing, when you talk about chasing happiness, I always thought that I couldn't be happy. I always thought that it wasn't something, it was just not a state that I was capable of. And so for me, chasing happiness is about actually chasing an understanding of what happiness is for me and accepting that that doesn't look the same as someone else's. I'm not Ellie constantly teases me about the fact that she'll tell me something really exciting and I'll be awesome. And, and she's jumping up and down doing a happy clap. And I'm just yeah, awesome. And, I think when we talk about chasing happiness, and if we're referencing spirituality and, being a spiritual being and all of those things, I think it really is just about, rather than chasing the concept of happiness, chasing our own definition of it, really understanding what it looks like for us, and accepting that actually, we are all different, and it will look different for everybody. And actually, I am perfectly happy in my life. I'm just not outwardly jumping up and down about it. But I'm a Taurus with a Pisces moon. That's not my style. But I think that's the thing that for me is one of the more important things that I'd like to leave your listeners with, is just absolutely chase happiness, chase it with everything you've got, but know that happiness for you is not happiness for me or for Crystal or for, anyone else. Like, happiness is different for everyone. And when we learn to get that level of self-acceptance that comes with being happy, I think that's where our truth is. That's where our most abundant life is, and we just have to be in that space as much as possible, and be okay with it.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. I think that's the perfect place to end for the day. I adore you. And this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm so excited. And I know because of where you live in the world, you are totally in a totally different time zone. It's even a different day for you, I believe, right? You guys are December 1st now. So yeah. Thank you, because I appreciate you waking up super early. I appreciate you hopping on here with me, juggling time zones and different days and all of that.
Yeah. So
I will, of course, put in the show notes for everyone listening, all of the ways that you can get in touch with Erin and follow everything that she does. And I cannot thank you enough, Erin, for joining me today. This has been a magical conversation.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me and for sharing your energy with me. It's always great to have big, beautiful conversations with people. So I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for listening. I appreciate that you guys come back week after week and listen to all of these amazing conversations and get to know these amazing people from around the world that I get to communicate with. I hope you guys all have a magical week, and I will chat with you next week. Bye for now.